Hey guys, welcome to my second tutorial. Yesterday we spoke about just the fundamentals of the zodiac wheel, and I wanted to expand a little bit on that today, but focusing more on the planetary energetic influences of each of those houses, and each of the houses that each planet rules. So I have another prop here, one I prepared earlier, but before I actually get into which planet rules each house, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the orbit of the solar system and the positioning of each of the planets and what that basically means to our lives. So in our solar system, obviously, we have the sun, which isn't technically a planet, it's our star. And then obviously we have the lunar body, the moon as well, which isn't technically a planet. But in our orbit, we have our smaller terrestrial planets, okay, that sits between the Kuiper belt and the sun. So these are the smaller terrestrial planets. We call them terrestrial planets because they're made up majority of rock. And Mars, such nickel, iron, etc., etc. So rock and metals, okay? So for example, Mars, we know that Mars has the iron core, and during the Great Iron Age, that was the age of Aries, which is ruled by Mars, okay? And that's why there was so much war during that particular millennia. Okay, so we have our inner and our outer planets. So our inner planets are the planets that sit between the sun and the Kuiper belt, okay? So obviously Mercury, Mars, Venus, Earth. And then we have our outer planets, what we call our generational planets, which sit outside of the Kuiper belt. So Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, okay? Now, our inner planets, the inner planetary system, are the energies that basically rule the personal aspects of our lives, okay? So we know that Venus, whenever we hear the word Venus, we think of the goddess of love, okay, Athena. We know Mars is the warrior planet, okay, so that rules our first house of Aries, so it's all about fire, energy, passion, action, and how we actually act in our day-to-day lives. Mercury, closest to the sun, so the first in our orbit, so Mercury basically receives the majority of solar information, so we know that our energy comes from our star, our sun. We are a star system. So Mercury generally tends to rule aspects in our lives such as communication, telecommunication, technology, okay? So that's why, as I mentioned yesterday, during our retrogrades, and for the purpose of this tutorial and my apparent speech impediment, I will often refer to retrogrades as RXs or retros just because it's easier, all right? And sometimes my brain has a hard time keeping up with my tongue and vice versa, okay? So yeah, Mercury generally tends to receive the majority of information, solar information from the sun, and so that's why it's so imperative when it comes to our communication and the way in which we communicate here in the 3D realm, okay? And then our outer planets, our outer gas planets, okay, so these planets consist mainly of gas, okay, their bodies are mainly gaseous planets. These rule sort of the big picture, generational aspects of our life, okay, so for example, Jupiter, which rules the ninth house of Sagittarius, is all about higher learning and philosophy and long distance travel, and going long distances or going long amounts of time. Pluto generally tends to rule transformation in our lives, okay, so we often have transformations sporadically throughout our lives, whereas planets like Mercury and Venus, they rule the day-to-day things, so relationships with other people, emotions, feelings, love, communication, etc., etc. So I hope that makes sense to you. So I wanted to basically go through the zodiac wheel again, but talk more about the planets as opposed to the houses this time. So we will start with the first house, which is the first house of Aries. And I want to talk a little bit about transits. I'm not going to go too comprehensively into it today because I do want to save that for another video, because I do want to discuss it in more detail. So we'll talk about transit times and how long each planet takes to move through each of the houses. And also talk a little bit about returns and how we can find transits and returns in our natal charts. So we'll get stuck into it. First house, Aries, okay, ruled by Mars, the warrior planet, okay? So this is all about how we act. It's all about being pragmatic, action, passion, that fire in our belly, that solar plexus, okay? Now, Mars generally tends to take about 1.5 months to transit each of the houses, just depending on retros as well, which I will delve a little bit deeper into when we come to Mercury retrograde, okay? All right, then we have our second house, which is Taurus. Taurus is house of possessions, tangible possessions, security, finance, and that is ruled by Venus, okay? And Venus can take anywhere between 1 to 2 weeks to move through each of the signs, each of the constellations, okay? Mercury, now Mercury, tricky bugger. We know that Mercury often goes RX, so he can take anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how many retros he has in a particular cycle. Basically, a retrograde is when we look at the elliptical, it's when a planet appears to be regressing, so it appears to be going backwards. It's not actually going backwards, but it just appears to be going that way. So that's why sometimes it can take, when it is in retro, it can take a little bit longer to actually move through the sign, okay? And that can be, Mercury can be anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks, okay? We have the moon, which stays in the sign, which stays in each sign for 2 days, as we know. The sun, 1 month, as we know, okay? So 2 lunar periods. Then we get into the 8th house, which is Pluto. Now, Pluto is a major generational planet, okay? Pluto rules the 8th house, Scorpio's 8th house of death and transformation. And Pluto is hugely transformative. I like to refer to Pluto as the planet that comes into a sign and just F's it all up. But it's all about rebirth, okay? So we may feel when we're going through a transformation that everything is falling away, and yes, it is, but it's basically because we are purging the things in our life that are holding us back, that are stopping us from being able to transmute from one stage to the next stage, okay? And Pluto actually stays in, can stay in any particular house anywhere between 15 and 30 years, okay? So it's called a generational planet. I apply this particular transit to the way in which we categorize our generations. So we have our baby boomers, our Gen X, our Gen Ys, Gen Zs. So with the Pluto transits, that's how I actually categorize each of the generations, okay? So yeah, Pluto generally tends to stay in a sign for anywhere up to 27 to 30 years. I can think of a major economic player nation that are actually going through their Pluto return at the moment, okay? So Pluto will take 250 years to actually orbit the entire zodiac wheel. And yeah, there's a particular nation, I think we all know who it is, who are going through their Pluto return at the moment. So they actually signed their Declaration of Independence 248 years ago. So it makes a lot of sense that they are going through this transformative period where it just feels as though everything is in complete disarray, okay? Then we have Jupiter, okay, so Jupiter generally tends to stay in one of the zodiac houses for about a year. Saturn, our planet, our karmic planet, can stay in a sign for about 2.5 years. Now, we often in our lives, if we make it into our middle ages, around about the age between 27 and 30, we experience what's called our Saturn return. And that's when Saturn transits all the way around the zodiac wheel and heads back to and positions itself back into the house that it was in when you were born, and that's called our Saturn return. And that's why we generally, around the age between 28 and 30, I know me, I had a midlife breakdown. It wasn't even midlife, it's early life, but I had a major midlife breakdown. Change of career, dumped my boyfriend, I cut half my hair off, had half long hair, half shaved head. So yeah, I went through definitely, categorically, textbook my Saturn return. Uranus, okay, so Uranus, or for the purposes of this video, and because I know that my friends are very cheeky and always laugh at that word, I'm going to call it Uranus. So Uranus stays in a house for about 7 years. Okay, so if we're very lucky and we live to a ripe old age, we will actually experience our Uranus return. Okay, Uranus is all about rebellion, science, space travel. Okay. And then we have Neptune, which stays in a sign for about 14 years. Okay, so most of us will likely never experience a Neptune return. Neptune is all about imagination and dreaming. Okay, so the Neptune mantra is I dream, and it rules the 12th house of Pisces. Okay, the other mantras that are applied to each of the planets are Mars is I act. Okay, so as I mentioned, the solar plexus is all about action, pragmatism, passion, the fire in the belly. Venus obviously is I love, Mercury is I think, Moon is I feel, so I emote. The moon is all about our emotions, the ebbs and the flows, and going through that full gamut of emotions that we have to sit with in our lives. It can't be up all the time. Perfect example is at the moment, Sydney, Australia, we are smack bang in right in the middle of our spring season, but it's raining, it's cold, wet, miserable and raining, hence why I'm extra sparkly today, because I always feel the impetus to go a little bit extra sparkly when it seems a little bit dreary outside. But it can't be sunny and fun and games and, you know, solar energy all the time. We have to have that beautiful water that helps to seed life here in the 3D realm. We have to have that to wash everything away. So we always have to have balance, always have to have balance in duality. Okay, so the moon, we know the moon affects our tides, but it also affects the ebb and flow of our emotions as well, of the spectrum, the dichotomy of our emotions. Okay, Pluto is I empower. I like to think of Pluto as I transform, because it really is a very transformative energy that comes from Pluto. Jupiter is I grow, so it's all about expansion, rules the 9th house of Sagittarius, higher learning, education. Okay, Saturn, I achieve. So Saturn is all about karmic laws. What I love about Saturn is it gives us the opportunity to be able to assess and transmute what seems inauspicious in our lives into the auspicious. Okay, so I hope you found that informative. Again, I do want to do a separate video where we're getting up to 15 minutes on this video, so I think I've probably extended my welcome. I do want to talk about in more depth, a little bit more comprehensively about returns and transits and also retrogrades as well, but I will do that in another video. I want to thank you for your time. Thank you so much for honouring me with your time. And if you stuck with me for the full 15 minutes, good on you. Please subscribe to this channel if you found this informative. Please feel free to drop a comment below in the section below, letting me know of any subjects or topics that you would like me to discuss in regards to astrology. All right, thanks again, guys, and I will see you on the next video. KLB out. Bye.